All right, so let's talk about mental hurdles. Here's where I think the discussion gets interesting, because the mental hurdles, even when you do everything right, are really hard for bulking and cutting, especially because the people that tend to bulk tend to be insecure about being too small or too skinny. This was me. And the people who tend to want to cut tend to be insecure about being, too fat or whatever. And so that poses challenges. The reverse also poses challenges. If you've always tried to bulk and now you're going to cut and you lose a little bit of size, it freaks you out, and vice versa. If you've lost a lot of weight, you're going on a bulk to speed up your metabolism, feel a little bigger, reverse gears. So let's talk a little bit about.
So I can't speak for the other competitors out there, but I definitely looked like the stereotypical bodybuilder with the big old oversized hoodie over his head and headphones on and like just baggy everything. And I used to train this way. Now, I know why I was drawn to that. It wasn't like a fashion statement. Like the psychological game was so big and so impactful that I wanted to fool myself. I wanted to cover myself up and not allow like how much my pumps or what I look like today, or if I knew too, there was days when I would be carrying a little bit of inflammation. And so then I literally look, when you start, and the leaner you get, the more this is like this, where you like, oh my God, I feel I'm doing everything right, but yet I look fatter today. Like I had all those challenges. And so I'm such a numbers person, and I believe that I did the work. I did the work in figuring out my maintenance. I've done the due diligence of like tracking my stuff. It's like, I know I'm hitting my protein. I know I'm doing, like, I got to trust the process. And part of trusting the process and getting over this mental hurdle,
knowing that you were going to mess with yourself if you looked in the mirror.
And so I would cover myself up. I would stay covered up purely for the mental game of knowing that I would get in my own head and start to mess with it. The scale is the same way. It's like another way of, I think the scale and the mirror sometimes can lie to us, and that can really get in your head and then make you course correct. And so I would cover up like that.
Yeah. So with bulking, if you're the hard gainer, okay, the mental games with bulking that can happen, or hurdles, is, wow, if the scale's going up, I must be doing good. That was me. Like if the scale was going up to the point, here's how bad it was. And this is just a little self-awareness. But as a kid, I would always weigh myself at the end of the day after my last meal, because I knew I was heaviest at that time. I had to see that number go up. And if a particular dinner made me hold more water and made me gain a little bit of weight on the scale, well, guess which dinner I would have most nights, right? Yeah. The most inflammatory meal I could eat. So for that person, bulking can be a challenge, because anything going up on the scale is a good thing, even though it may all be body fat. And this is what would happen to me. Now, for somebody who is afraid of gaining body fat, somebody who, let's say you've lost a lot of weight, now you're doing a reverse diet, or let's say you're a female, this is more common for women, and you're like, okay, I know I'm supposed to go into calorie surplus to build, let's say, the butt I want, or to build the curves I want, or speed up my metabolism. Now any pound that goes up on the scale is like nails on a chalkboard. It's like terrible, I went too high in a surplus, back out type of deal. So the scale can really, I would say, is your enemy unless you combine it with other metrics and you're objective about the metrics. Scale, body fat test, once every 2 weeks, otherwise don't touch them at all. And then after, like Adam said, if you get 2 consecutive measurements that are going in the wrong direction, then you start to make some adjustments. Now with cutting, if you were always a skinny guy and you're all constantly on a bulk, and now you're like, you know what, I think I want to get really lean, it's terrifying to feel yourself getting smaller. I'm getting smaller, I'm weaker, this isn't good, or whatever. And then you'll reverse out. And then to the person who, is always has dealt with being small, or dealt with being fat or whatever, any pound that goes down, I should say, is now a plus, even though they're losing muscle.
The irony of this is that even though these are 2 completely different individuals and are insecure about 2 completely different things, it's exactly the same thing.
Yes.
It's exactly the same thing that's going through their head. And that's why too, I don't like, the other part of this is recognizing that this is a really long process and slow process, and accepting that. It's just not like, part of why this is so challenging and there's such a mental hurdle here is that we're marketed to, and we're constantly see these 30-day challenges and these before and afters, and there's always this example of somebody who did something crazy radical in 3 months or 6 months. And so we have this perception that, man, if I'm dialed, I'm doing all these things, I should see all this. And then when we don't, we assume it's wrong or we're not doing something right. And then we course correct. And when we course correct, we many times overcorrect, and we just shoot ourselves in the foot. And so part of that, and this is why the very beginning of this conversation, I started off with how important the maintenance thing is, how important of really figuring out if I stayed consistent with these calories and I did my daily habits, this is my routine. I go to work, I do this. It's like, that's like 90% of my life outside of random vacations and different stuff. Like that's what I do. And you know what it takes to kind of just maintain your body. That's so important because from there, you can make these little adjustments and it's a hurry up and wait.
Here's your objective measurements that you can use. And I do not suggest you do these daily because it will mess with your head. I think literally once every 2 weeks is a good place to look, but it's weight, body fat percentage, circumference measurements. These are all good. If you do all 3 of them, better because you can compare all of them. And then lastly, here's my favorite metric to pay attention to, which is performance in the gym. If you're stronger, whether you're bulking or cutting, first off, if you're bulking, you better be getting stronger. If you're getting stronger while you're cutting, you are crushing it. You're doing amazing. If you maintain your strength while you're in a cut,
you're crushing.
You're doing very good.
Yeah.
So those 4 things are what should drive which direction you go, not the subjective feeling of I feel fluffy or I feel small or I feel big or I'm gaining too much or oh, what's going on. That will 100% point you in the wrong direction.
I mean, that was one of my favorite things about going through that process was, again, up until this point in my life, even though I had already been a trainer for over 10 years, I had never tracked this diligently, and I never really got to see firsthand how much our body can fluctuate because of sodium and water and inflammation, and how much of a mind fuck that is, even for a trainer who thinks he knows what he's doing. It's like that was really enlightening for me to go like, wow, how many of my clients go through this where
they freak out because they gain or lose 3
they
pounds,
eat a food they don't even know that they have an inflammatory response to a food. It's a food they eat all the time, so they think that it's okay, but they've never even tracked diligently enough to know that, wow, every time they eat that food, they get slightly inflamed. Their body holds on to an extra few glasses of water, which looks like another 2% body fat on your body out of nowhere, when it had nothing to do with actually body fat going on there, and it's temporary and it'll go away in the next 48 to 72 hours, but you don't know that. And so you see that and you wake up after a day of what you thought was perfect. I did my walk, I worked out, I was perfect on my diet, I ate everything perfect, and then you wake up and you look worse than what you did the day before.
You got to know yourself. Like for me, if I felt bigger, then I was moving in the right direction. And so objective measurements would have really helped me quite a bit. For someone else, feeling smaller might just be like, yeah, I'm going in the right direction, even though they're losing muscle and getting weaker. So those objective measurements every couple of weeks are really important because read those, deny your feelings, look at those numbers and go, okay, here's what's actually happening. Right.